Bienvenidos, damas y caballeros, to the Spanish Language Lab. In this video, we're going to read a short story about the Napoleonic Wars in Spanish, of course, and this will be an exercise in learning more about the imperfect subjunctive mood. The imperfect subjunctive is how we talk about the past tense using the subjunctive form of Spanish grammar. So, with that said, let's jump in, and you'll see that the imperfect subjunctive verbs are highlighted in bold. So we see our first one here in the first paragraph, tomaran. All right, let's get to it. Cuento el eco de los cañones durante las campañas napoleónicas. Los soldados franceses avanzaban por Europa con la esperanza de que la gloria del emperador no tuviera fin. Sin embargo, el destino de la guerra siempre dependía de que los generales tomaran decisiones acertadas en medio del caos. En una fría mañana, un capitán rezaba el silencio para que sus hombres resistieran el asalto enemigo. La nieve cubría el campo y parecía imposible que alguien sobreviviera a la artillería que caía sin descanso. Napoleón, en su carpa de mando, exigía, exigía que sus mensajeros llegaran rápido con noticias de los flancos, pues la batalla podía torcerse en cualquier instante. Muchos oficiales murmuraban entre sí, deseando que las alianzas cambiaran de lado, como tantas veces había ocurrido en Europa. Cuando la noche cayó, un soldado herido confesó su único deseo, que su familia recordara su sacrificio, aunque él nunca volviera a casa. All right, so the short story is called El Eco de los Cañones, the echo of the canyons, not canyons, the cannons, the echo of the cannons. And this is again about the Napoleonic Wars, so late 1700s, early 1800s. And we're talking about the French soldiers, los soldados franceses, advancing throughout Europe with the hope of glory, with the hope that the glory of their emperor would never finish. But Napoleon's reign as emperor was infamously very short. All right, so we see here the first use of the imperfect subjunctive. Let's understand why it was used here. So I'll read that sentence again. Sin embargo, el destino de la guerra siempre dependía de que los generales tomaran decisiones acertadas en medio del caos. Okay, let's see. El destino de la guerra siempre dependía, would depend, de que los generales tomaran decisiones. Okay, so why was the imperfect subjunctive used here? All right, so really it's just for two reasons. One, we're talking about the past, so that's a necessary condition for the imperfect subjunctive. And two, we're talking about a condition, right? So the destiny of the war always depended upon the generals taking decisions, certain decisions in the mid of all the chaos, right? And so it's conditional. Conditional statements um, sometimes do invoke the subjunctive. So that's what we have there. Let's move on. En un, yeah, that sentence has a subjunctive. So let's use it. Let's read it together. Let me highlight that. En una fría mañana, un capitán rezaba el silencio para que sus hombres resistieran el asalto enemigo. So, why was the subjunctive used here? This is, so you know that the subjunctive syntactical structure has like a formula. There's like trigger words, right? So for the present tense, it would be first subject, desires, hopes, hypothesizes, concern about something, plus the word que, plus the second subject, followed by a verb. So we have something similar here, but we have para que, for the purpose of. This is a cue. This is a trigger for the subjunctive, para, which indicates purpose, right? So that's one clue as the subjunctive will be used. Also, we're talking about the past. En una fría mañana, un capitán rezaba el silencio para que sus hombres resistieron el asalto enemigo. Rezaba is an imperfect past tense, the indicative imperfect past tense. Right, so that lets us know the sentence is talking about the past tense. And then we have this trigger, para que, which indicates a subjunctive. And with those two pieces of information, that lets you know that the next verb should be a imperfect subjunctive, and indeed it is. All right, so the next example will be the next sentence, which would be right here. La nieve cubría el campo y parecía imposible que alguien sobreviviera a la artillería que caía sin descanso. All right, so how do we know that this verb really ought to be the imperfect subjunctive? So let's look at context clues yet again. La nieve cubría. So cubría is past tense. So we know that this sentence is describing something that occurred in the past. Good. Let's keep going. El campo parecía imposible que. Right here, this is the trigger phrase. Parecía imposible que. So first of all, it's a negation, right? So no creo. So like yo creo, like yes, let's go with that. So whenever you have a negation, that's a cue that we might be talking about a subjunctive. When we talk about probabilities, that's a cue that we might be talking about a subjunctive, because probability is adjacent to uncertainty. You only talk about probabilities when you're uncertain about something. 50% chance of rain, 50% chance of not rain, 80% chance of snow, but 20% chance of no snow. There's uncertainty being quantified there. So when you're talking about impossibility, so you're saying it appears. First of all, you're uncertain, but it appears impossible. So that's a lot like saying it seems like there's a 0% probability that something else can happen, right? That right there, to me, between that and cubría, past tense, subjunctive, justified. So sobreviviera makes sense to me as to why it's used. Also, it follows the trigger word que. Parecía imposible que. So that checks out. All right, so the next sentence would be, let's focus on this. We don't have to read the whole sentence. Napoleón, en su carpa de mando, exigía que sus mensajeros llegaran rápido con noticias de los flancos. All right, so the first verb might be mando, actually. But that might be a noun. Forget that. Forget what I said. But this is certainly a verb. Exigía. It means to command, to give a demand, to give an order. Napoleon, a general, gives demands. Makes sense. What's important here is that this is the imperfect indicative form of the word exigir. So that indicates to us we're talking about the past. Good, we're talking about the past. Let's keep reading. Que sus mensajeros llegaran rápido. Now, let's see. Um, so this is a demand. This is a demand that Napoleon is issuing. So actually the trigger here is exigía que, because exigía is a command, it's an order that Napoleon is issuing, and so that triggers a subjunctive. But I'm checking with chat right here, and it's saying that direct commands in the present apply the use of an indicative or imperative. What is it saying? Imperative. Direct commands are imperative, but whenever a command is or request or order is reported, doubted, or feared, it's subjunctive use. So here, Napoleón en su carta de mando exigía de sus mensajeros que llegaran rápido con noticias en los flancos, pues la batalla podía torcerse en cualquier instante. I'm not gonna bullshit you. I'm not totally sure how to explain the use of this. So we'll leave it at that and we'll move on. All right. Muchos oficiales murmuraban entre sí, deseando que las alianzas cambiaran de lado como tantas veces había ocurrido en Europa. Muchos oficiales murmuraban entre sí, deseando. Okay, so this one is actually pretty straightforward. So we know in this sentence, we know we're talking about the past, right? Murmuraban, right there. Indicative, imperfect past tense. And then we have one of the rules for, one of the triggers for the subjunctive is a desire. Here we literally have the word deseando, desiring que. Boom. Subjunctive is triggered. We already seen the past tense used in a sentence. Therefore, the imperfect subjunctive must necessarily follow. Las alianzas cambiaran de lado. There you go. Done. All right, last example right here. Cuando la noche cayó, un soldado herido confesó su único deseo. The word desire is there. And we have the definite past tense. Cayó, he fell. Que su familia recordara su sacrificio. There you go. So we have a past tense, and then we have a desire being expressed, therefore the next verb, and we have the trigger word que, and we have the first subject, the soldier, the second subject, his family, followed by a verb. This follows a pretty straightforward syntactic formula. Recordará is the subjunctive verb used here, and rightfully so. All right, so that's it. Those are the 6 imperfect subjunctive verbs used in the short story about the Napoleonic Wars. I hope you found this useful and fun. If you didn't find it useful, or if you did, let me know. If you thought it was a waste of your time, you thought it was a good use of your time, let me know. For 2 reasons. One, I'll take that feedback and make better videos. But also for the sake of the growth of the channel, all that really matters is engagement. So if you hate what I'm doing here, be sure to let me know. All right. Until next time, ciao, ciao, damas y caballeros.